Our next presenter is Kelly Poland. And let me tell you a little bit about Kelly. I also know Kelly very well, too. She's a compassionate soul who seeks to deeply connect with others. With creative training in graphic design and spiritual training in energy medicine, her vision for the world is one of authenticity. She's a mother of 2 sons, consciously raising them from the heart. Kelly is a radiant light and a young shaman, bringing her gift of divine connection to the world. Please put your hands together for Kelly Poland.
This is great. This is great to be here. Thank you to Sacramento Soul Talks for inviting me back and for being in Sacramento. What an amazing offering that Sacramento has. And as I've been here today, watching all the speakers and the artists and the storytellers and the musicians, it just really fills my heart that we have this here. I love being part of this community of consciousness. So thank you. And thank you for every single person that's here, because it's really the collective group that makes it powerful. I want to begin by asking you a question. Does anybody here ever have any thoughts that pop in their head that maybe they just wish weren't there? Anybody? Maybe critical thoughts or limiting ones, things that maybe they tell you why you can't do something or why you shouldn't do something or maybe why you're not good enough. So that's what I want to talk about, those kinds of thoughts. And then beyond that, what is our truth? I was having lunch recently with a friend of mine who is a meditation teacher, and she was sharing with me this idea that my thoughts are like the weather. They come and they go, but they aren't me. And some thoughts are like fluffy white clouds, and maybe these are cheery thoughts and they feel good. And then other ones are darker and stormy clouds. Those feel heavy. But no matter what the weather, it never stays the same. It's constantly changing. And the less attached I get to it, like my thoughts, the more I can hold on to this sense of myself. And my friend went on to quote Marianne Williamson that there's no such thing as a gray sky. The sky is always blue. We are the blue sky, the perfection that exists always. Sometimes, however, gray clouds come in and cover the blue sky. And these might be our fearful thoughts or beliefs, or maybe our dysfunctional patterns. And they take hold in our mind, and then we start to think that that's what's real. But the blue sky is always there, even if we can't see it. I exist beyond the cloudy thoughts that might go through my mind. I love this thought. I love this concept. This is such a wonderful idea. Music, it's musical. I love this idea because then I can become a neutral witness to my thoughts, and I can let them come and go without buying into them as truth, without getting hooked in. Now, I don't know about you, but I get lots of opportunities to practice being neutral to my thoughts. And a recent one for me is around singing. I love to sing. And when I was a little girl, I wanted to be a singer. I wanted to grow up and be a singer. And this past year, I've had more opportunities to sing in my community, which I love. And wouldn't you know it, there's critical thoughts there, right there, telling me why I'm not good enough or why I'm not perfect, and I might as well just stop. And in the past, I might have believed that. I might have taken it as truth. I might have taken it so seriously that I would have stopped doing something that I love in order to save myself from embarrassment. But now I know I can just recognize it as one of these stormy thoughts, and I can let it pass on through. I know that these thoughts are not me. They're just echoes of my past. So here's how I see what's happening. As we're going through life, especially when we're young, we're adopting beliefs and behaviors. in order to stay safe. And this is going to be different for different people because we each have a different idea of what it means to be safe. For some, it's real physical safety. But most of the time, it's this illusion of safety. Part of our brain doesn't know the difference between imagined threat and real threat. Let me take you back to a moment in my past. I remember when I was 6 years old, and I was on a plane with my family. And I was looking out the window, and I asked a question to my mom or my dad, and it was a legitimate question from my 6-year-old perspective. And at that moment, somebody behind me laughed. And they might not have been laughing at me. They might not have even heard me, but I perceived it that way. I felt embarrassed. I felt misunderstood. And in that moment, I locked in the belief when I ask questions, people are going to laugh at me. And I programmed my inner self, don't ask questions. And now every time I have a chance to ask a question, guess what thought pops in my head? Saying, watch out. Someone else in my shoes on that same day on that plane, imagine someone else there might have had a different response. They might have heard the laughter behind and felt thrilled. Like, hey, I just made somebody laugh, that was great. That person might have adopted a different belief in that moment. And we do this for all kinds of things. Don't rock the boat. Don't speak your truth. Don't ask for help. Don't be vulnerable. Don't cry. We've spent a lifetime adopting beliefs and training our thoughts to pop in to protect us. And sometimes we know where they come from. You know, I clearly remember that 6-year-old self that felt embarrassed. Sometimes we don't remember where they come from. But there they are, like a software program scanning for viruses and then shutting down to protect itself. In my life, early on, I took on the belief that it wasn't okay to speak my truth, that it wasn't okay to express myself authentically. And I don't remember the how or the when that I took this on, but I do know that as a child, I was very sensitive. I was this empathic that could feel other people's feelings, but I didn't know what was happening. And I took other people's emotions personally. If they were upset, I took it as a rejection of me, as if it were my fault. And so what I learned to do to protect myself was become the person you wanted me to be. I would show up as exactly what you wanted, therefore you had no reason to reject me. And I became really skilled at knowing pretty quickly what's this person gonna accept in me. And then that's what I would show them. I call it selective expression. I wasn't fully expressing myself. I was only showing this narrow piece of me that I knew would be acceptable. And I learned to put filters on everything. I filtered everything I said, everything I did. How is this going to be received? Is this going to be okay if I say this or do this? And it was exhausting. It is exhausting. I was losing my sense of self. Who was I? So let me go back to this idea of the blue sky. If that's me, this blue sky, this absolute perfection, this God part of me, this divine part, let's call it my essence or my soul, the part of me that transcends this physical body, that is eternal. If that's me, how do I access that part when I'm living in what feels like stormy weather? Whoa, there it is. So I've learned that it's right here in my heart. It's in the center of my being. And when I can drop into my heart, that's when I can access that, my soul. That's where the voice of my soul is. Excuse me. Let me bring in another idea right now. Imagine I brought in this really big mosaic, and I invited all of you to look at it, but come really, really close and look at it up close. What would we see? It would look like we would just be seeing individual tiles. We would just be seeing colors that are singular. Maybe it looks like there's no reason, no pattern. And from this place, we might believe that's all there is. But then if I ask you to step back, and you can step back and start to see it. Now you see the whole big picture, right? You see, from this place, you can see that each of these tiles was in fact meaningful. It was part of this whole big, beautiful image that was emerging, and how every color was needed. The dark parts help define the light parts. So this is how I see life. Life is like a big mosaic or a big tapestry being woven. And a lot of times we're living life from a place of unconscious, like being unconscious, living. And it's like we're looking at it up close. And we might see our life events as being unrelated to each other, or we might think they're random. They don't make sense. But if we can step back and see the bigger picture, then we can start to see how, everything is falling into place as it's meant to. We see how people come into our lives at just the right time. We see how we gained blessings from things that we thought, even our challenging moments, brought some of our greatest gifts. And so how do we get there? How do we get to this bigger perspective? Well, I think the first step is awareness. To be aware, where are we starting from? Where are we at? What's the perspective we're holding right now? And if we're looking at a situation, or if we're looking at our life really close up, we can say, okay, what would I see if I were to step back? Show me a bigger picture here. Show me a higher perspective. What would I see? What would I notice? And then notice what information you might receive. You know, it might come in like a knowing, might come in like a feeling, or maybe just a sense of peace. And your mental mind might jump in and tell you why that's wrong, why you're right and this person's wrong. You know, and you can just let those thoughts pass like those clouds. But staying in a space of this intention, that you're knowing that this big picture's there, and okay, I'm seeing it from a higher perspective. I think our soul, I believe our soul, this part of us that's eternal, is always looking at this big picture. That's the scene that our soul is seeing all the time. It's seeing the connections in our life events. In fact, I believe it's creating those connections. And so when we can hold that perspective, I find it's easier to say thank you. Thank you for each moment. Even if in the moment I can't make sense of it. I'm not sure what the blessing here is. I'm not sure how this is fitting into it, but I trust that it's fitting in because I know there's a big picture. There's a higher perspective to be seen. So where am I going with all this? Well, if our soul knows this big picture all the time, and we can access our soul in our hearts, my invitation is that we start living from our hearts. So what would that look like? Imagine a world where we went to our hearts for our guidance, and we ask questions like, what does my heart want? Or we ask questions like, what am I called to do right now? You know, asking what am I called to do is very different than asking what I should do. Should is a very mental concept. That's really wrapped in obligation. But what am I called to do? That's coming from a bigger place. That's a soul question that's looking at the bigger picture. We live in a culture that values the mind. We go to our mind a lot for our answers. But the mind and the heart speak very different. And if you're wondering what those voices might sound like, how they're different, I'll share with you how it is for me. The voice of my soul is very gentle. It's always loving, always compassionate. It's quieter than my mental voice, but it's quicker. And so it's usually that first thought when I ask a question to myself, it's usually that first thought that pops in that feels good before my mental mind starts jumping in on top of it. So I have to get really still to get to that place where I can hear it. My soul's voice it's expansive, it's inspired, it's limitless. Now, in contrast, my mental voices are a little bit louder. They're urgent. They're usually wrapped in fear. The mental voice is telling me why not to do something. And a lot of times it'll explain it to me in terms of what's logical, what's practical. Here's why you shouldn't do it. And if it's wrapped in, if it's fear or doubt, if there's fear or doubt there, it's coming from the mental voice. I had a funny situation a few years ago when I was at an improv show. Does anybody here like improv? I love it. It makes me laugh. So I love watching improv, and I had thought about taking a class for many years, and I never did because it scared me. And on this one particular night, I was there with my husband, and I leaned over to him at the intermission, and I said, I bet this place offers classes. And not a minute later, the MC got on the microphone and said, we're starting a new series of classes on Monday, if anyone wants to join us. And in that moment, I heard two distinct voices run through me. One said, oh yeah, and one said, absolutely not. And I had to laugh out loud. It was so clear to me in that moment that I was hearing these two separate voices. One, my mental voice, which was wrapped in fear, telling me why not to do it, trying to protect me. And then this other voice that was coming from my heart, this voice of enthusiasm. And the word enthusiasm comes from the Latin en theos, which means in God. I love that. To me, it's saying my enthusiasm is God in me. It's spirit wanting to express itself through me, and that which excites me is the key to knowing what that is. So in that moment of improv class potential there, I could hear the voice of fear saying no. I could hear the voice of God saying yes. And I got to choose. You know, I'm sitting there with a choice. I get to say yes to one of these. So I know you all want to know. Yes, I did. I said yes. I took it right. So this is how I want to live my life. And as I close today, I want to invite you to join me in seeing life as this giant, magnificent piece of art that's being created. And it's unique for each of us because we're all so unique. And it's intricate. And it's beautiful. And I get to choose my perspective. Am I looking at it up close? Or am I stepping back and am I seeing it from a higher perspective? And from this higher perspective, that's where I can really find gratitude for the perfection of it, for all the pieces, for the people that are coming in, for the situations that are coming in, for even the situations that I feel like are uncomfortable, because I know there's a blessing in there. And if I don't know what the blessing is right away, I can ask, what's the blessing here? Maybe I'm not seeing it. Okay, I'm not seeing it yet. What's the blessing here? But allow it to reveal itself to me. I invite you to get familiar with the voices that run through you. What does your mental voice sound like? What does your heart voice sound like? Because when we can hear the difference, we can make that choice. Let's start saying yes to the calling of our hearts. And let's start saying yes to this big picture that's revealing itself. And let's live from our hearts. That's my message today. Thank you.
Yay! Kelly Collins!